Sure, critics hated them, but what do they know? Just because a movie is kind of objectively bad doesn't mean it can't also be a pretty good time. In some cases, the movie being bad is exactly what makes it so fun to watch. 2018's Venom stars Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock, an American investigative reporter who forms an uneasy yet weirdly romantic relationship with an alien symbiote. Despite their differences, Eddie and Venom must work together as inhabitants of the same body to protect the Earth in the face of a worldwide symbiote invasion. Now, let's be honest. Sony's Spider-Man universe is not exactly famed for its high-quality productions. Venom earned a critical reception in the same ballpark as the other SSU movies too, scoring a woeful 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. Nevertheless, the movie was a massive global success at the box office, and it has since received 2 sequels. Venom's runaway popularity is a testament to the fact that it can be an enormously fun movie to watch, if you let yourself go along with the goofiness.
We are Venom.
And of course, Tom Hardy gives perhaps the most committed, mesmerizing, and entertaining lead performance in modern superhero movie history. Frankly, this one's worth watching for him alone. Released in 2012, Resident Evil Retribution is the 5th film in the Resident Evil series. It continues the previous film's loose adaptation of the beloved game franchise, and, like entries 1 and 4, is written and directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. This time around, the plot is essentially an opportunity to revisit and reflect on the franchise's history. As a zombie plague continues to ravage the Earth, Alice wakes up in an underwater Umbrella Corporation facility that specializes in generating clones and rendering outbreak simulations at various locations around the world. Naturally, she must fight to free herself and escape Umbrella's facility. Like every Resident Evil film, Retribution was widely derided by critics, landing a 28% on Rotten Tomatoes, along with the typical criticisms of being shallow, empty, and too interested in mindless spectacle. Among Paul W.S. Anderson's fans, however, it's held in very high regard to this day, and there's good reason for that. For the type of movie he's fond of making, Anderson is kind of a genius. Few people in Hollywood are as obsessed with hyper-slick, CGI-assisted action sequences. And in this sense, Retribution is arguably his magnum opus, a bold, brilliant testament to the joys of going too far. To be fair, the Resident Evil movie is worth watching if you're a fan of form-first action cinema, but Retribution is as close to a victory lap as the franchise will ever get. The DC Extended Universe was still getting started when Zack Snyder's Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice rolled around in 2016. At the time, the sole film in DC's answer to the MCU had been 2013's Man of Steel. Dawn of Justice really got things moving for the DCEU though, introducing not just Batman and Lex Luthor, but also Wonder Woman, for the first time ever in a live-action theatrical film, no less. The film's plot takes place in the aftermath of Man of Steel, with the world divided on the issue of Superman. Thanks to some sly manipulation on Luthor's part, Bruce Wayne is goaded into taking action against the Kryptonian, leading to a vicious and bitter showdown between the two superheroes. To be sure, Dawn of Justice is a deeply flawed film, and its 29% Rotten Tomatoes score isn't entirely undeserved. It is, after all, a dour, grim, and relentlessly dark blockbuster, one with a weird lack of any actual superheroics. Yet the film is fascinating as a thorny cultural object, one that deftly captures the political sentiment of its time.
Must there be a Superman?
There is.
It's also filled with creative flourishes and led by a genuine sense of vision, which is more than you can say for some superhero movies these days. In 2016, Justin Kurzel made the slightly odd choice of following up his historical epic Macbeth with a film adaptation of the Assassin's Creed video games.
What do you want from me?
Your past.
Assassin's Creed reunites the two stars of Macbeth for a very different kind of movie, bringing the epic mythology of the Ubisoft franchise to the screen, albeit with a brand new story. As in the games, the movie's world is embroiled in a secret conflict between two ancient orders, the Templar Order and the Assassin Brotherhood. Kurzel's Assassin's Creed follows Cal Lynch, a modern-day descendant of the Brotherhood whose genetic makeup grants him access to the memories of a 15th century Spanish assassin. As is the case with most video game movies, Assassin's Creed was pretty widely hated on release. The game's fans weren't especially fond of what Kurzel and the writers did with the lore, and the critics weren't much kinder, giving the movie a total score of 19% on Rotten Tomatoes. If you don't expect too much, though, Assassin's Creed is actually surprisingly watchable, and it certainly knows how to have fun with its own loopy premise. Plus, Kurzel nails the one thing that's really important in an Assassin's Creed movie: the stunts, which are elaborate, punchy, and well shot. No, it's no Macbeth, but whoever thought it would be? Warcraft loosely adapts a story from the game franchise of the same name, which is most well known for the absurdly popular MMORPG World of Warcraft. The film jumps right into the game's sprawling high fantasy world, in which the fell-riddled orcs of Draenor set out to invade the world of Azeroth. When war breaks out, the human warrior, Anduin Lothar, joins up with a dissident orc named Durotan to take down the villainous warlock Gul'dan.
For Azeroth! For Azeroth and the Alliance!
Obviously, this is a lot of lore to get through, more than even the most genre-devoted fantasy films usually allow themselves. But therein lies the fun. Despite a few deviations from the game's mythology, Warcraft was clearly made by people who love the franchise, and who aren't afraid to dive right into its brand of epic storytelling. Sadly, many weren't on board at the time. The movie flopped in the US, and critics reacted harshly, giving it a total 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. Nevertheless, viewers who appreciate ambitious and spectacular fantasy epics will find a lot to love during their adventure to Azeroth. Chris Evans' most famous superhero role is obviously that of Captain America, and his second most famous is Johnny Storm.
Oh my God, he's gonna say it!
Say what?
Avengers! Flame on! Sorry, what now?
But Evans actually has a third superhero on his resume. In 2009, he played Nick Gant, a man with telekinetic powers, in the original superhero action thriller Push. Essentially a superhero indie film, the movie is set in a world populated by humans with varying psychic abilities. After a US government agency develops a power-enhancing drug and kills numerous test subjects with it, telepath Kira Hudson escapes with a sample of the drug, triggering an international manhunt. Meanwhile, clairvoyant teen Cassie Holmes seeks out Nick to persuade him to help her find Kira. Fun, solid, moody, and original, Push has more energy and creativity than a lot of more respectable later entries in the superhero genre. It didn't impress critics in 2009, and Rotten Tomatoes has it at 23%, but it's a very worthwhile watch, if only to enjoy a different kind of superpowered team-up action. These days, Zack Snyder is better known for his blockbusters, but on at least one occasion, he directed a wholly original, one-off fantasy vision with no pretension towards franchising. Sucker Punch stars Emily Browning as Baby Doll, a young woman who's committed to a mental institution by her abusive stepfather after he murders her mother. As the stepfather and the orderly plot to have Baby Doll lobotomized, she begins to perceive the institution as an elaborate fantasy world and joins forces with other imprisoned girls to plot an escape.
Remember, ladies, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
Sucker Punch was met with outright hostility by most critics back in 2011, and it has a 22% Rotten Tomatoes score to show for it. The movie's poor reputation isn't really hard to understand either, given that it's a hackneyed parade of fanciful action set pieces. Even so, this is also Snyder's most interesting and creatively vibrant movie. There's a lot to admire in its more surrealist approach to the action genre. And while the movie was initially criticized for objectifying its heroes, recent years have seen the emergence of a queer and feminist cult following, many of whom relate to the film's pitch-black view of the horrors of the patriarchy. Adapted from the groundbreaking MTV animated series of the same name, the 2005 movie Æon Flux keeps the bare basics of the show's premise. 4 centuries after most of humanity was wiped out by a deadly virus, the survivors live together in a walled city-state known as Bregna, which is ruled over by a technocratic council of scientists. Æon Flux, a skilled member of a rebel group, carries out operations to undermine the Bregnan authority until one mission leads her to question everything she knows about her world. Watching the finished product, it's clear that Æon Flux was hacked to bits by the studio prior to release. Critics certainly noticed this, giving the movie a 10% score on Rotten Tomatoes, and even director Karen Kusama has since disowned the film, claiming the finished product didn't match her original vision. But the reason Æon Flux went on the chopping block in the first place is that Paramount executives deemed it a financially intractable $50 million art film. And that artistic passion genuinely does come through, even in the film's existing form. Janky editing and hectic storytelling aside, Kusama is just too creative a filmmaker for Æon Flux to not be worth watching. Rendered through lush Y2K-esque imagery and ambitious action sequences, her dystopian sci-fi vision is often astonishing to watch unfold. Here's hoping we one day get a director's cut. Hancock is an offbeat 2008 superhero dramedy starring Will Smith as a reckless alcoholic superhero. John Hancock is a bitter and irresponsible loner whose heroic acts always create as much trouble as they solve. This renders him an object of constant ridicule by the public, until idealistic PR manager Ray strikes up a partnership with Hancock to help him improve his image.
Oh, stop crying, punk ass. Go ahead.
Even as it became a rousing box office success, Hancock was shunned by critics, scoring a mere 42% on Rotten Tomatoes. Many took issue with the film's tonal shift away from scrappy comedy into more conventional superhero adventure territory. But it nevertheless brought an enjoyably playful tone to the genre. And yes, the story settles into a familiar groove about halfway through, but even that's still a very entertaining groove. Frankly, Hancock now feels almost revolutionary in light of the comic book movies of today. Marvel and DC have dabbled in comedy in the 16 intervening years, but few of their movies have been as irreverent and gutsy as Hancock. Space operas are rare in today's cinema, and original space operas are even rarer. So thank the movie gods that the Wachowskis keep convincing Hollywood studios to pour enormous amounts of money into their wild ideas. In what may well have been the riskiest gamble of their careers, the sci-fi visionaries created Jupiter Ascending, a story about a housekeeper who embarks on an interstellar adventure after learning that she's got galactic royal blood. Jupiter Ascending didn't win over audiences or critics. It grossed $184 million worldwide against a budget at least that big, and currently holds a 28% score on Rotten Tomatoes. While some criticize the movie for being too goofy, the movie's real sin was not being based on any pre-existing property. It's really no sillier than Star Wars or Dune or any film in the MCU. What's more, these being the Wachowskis, the movie is filled with passion. You can sense their love of pulp sci-fi aesthetics in every vista and action set piece the movie throws at you. Not only that, but Jupiter Ascending displays a real sense of thematic purpose. Jupiter is a heroine who prevails not through meathead heroics, but integrity and compassion. If nothing else, you've got to give the movie credit for that. Rocky IV feels like a movie that slipped into the Rocky series after escaping from a much different and far crazier franchise. It's got a talking robot, a villain with superhuman strength, and montage after montage after montage. Honestly, Rocky IV is basically a sci-fi music video, complete with lackluster plot, flag-waving jingoism, and recycled clips from the first 3 movies in the franchise. As a result, it was left sprawling on the canvas with a 38% score on Rotten Tomatoes. But if you're watching Rocky IV as a sports movie, you're doing it wrong. This is really a superhero movie, with Rocky as kind of a punch-drunk Captain America sticking up for his fallen friend. And then there's Ivan Drago, a supervillain hybrid of Frankenstein's monster and the Terminator. And just like Schwarzenegger did, Dolph Lundgren delivers great one-liners with robotic perfection.
If he dies, he dies.
On top of its wacky comic book stylings, Rocky IV has some dramatic moments that work incredibly well too. Carl Weathers is great here as Apollo Creed, an aging warrior who's struggling with his own mortality, and the epic 80s montages feature some cool moments, contrasting Rocky's primitive training methods against Drago's technically advanced robo-gem. It might not compare to the original film or even its sequels, but if you're looking for some fun action schlock, Rocky IV is an absolute knockout. Released in 2005, Domino is a story based on Domino Harvey, a real woman who lived an extraordinary life. The daughter of prolific English actor Lawrence Harvey, Domino ditched a budding career as a fashion model to become a bounty hunter. The film tells a fictionalized story in which Domino, after being arrested by the FBI, recounts her story to a criminal psychologist, explaining the events that led to her involvement in a $10 million robbery 2 days earlier. Through Domino's account, we get to know her world and her colleagues, and it soon emerges that not everything in the case is as it seems. Domino is an incredibly cool and stylish movie, and Tony Scott's go-for-broke filmmaking choices have seldom been more energetic or emotional. And in addition to the framing two-hander between Keira Knightley and Lucy Liu, the supporting cast is astonishing. Mickey Rourke, Christopher Walken, Monique, Edgar Ramirez, Delroy Lindo, Mina Suvari, Macy Gray, Jacqueline Bisset, Dale Dickey, and Tom Waits all show up at some point. Yet critics at the time lambasted Domino for its over-the-top nature, as if that was a bad thing. Nowadays, the movie's Rotten Tomatoes score of 18% ranks among the lowest of Keira Knightley's career. The 1998 disaster movie Deep Impact begins as journalist Jenny Lerner discovers that an asteroid is on course to hit the Earth. Soon after, the US government teams up with the Russians to send a space mission to the comet's surface and alter its path using atomic weapons.
Hey, look at the bright side. We'll all have high schools named after us.
1998 had one of those summers which saw numerous blockbusters tackle similar themes within similar genres. As such, Deep Impact now largely exists under the shadow of Armageddon, that year's highest-grossing film. Both movies had middling critical reception, with Deep Impact sitting at 45% on Rotten Tomatoes. But in retrospect, it definitely deserved a better critical shake. Not only is it a sturdy, well-directed, and scientifically grounded blockbuster, but its focus on the human scale of the disaster feels genuinely refreshing by today's mushy green-screened standards. While director Mimi Leder offers up plenty of spectacle, she never lets us forget or overlook the people whose existence is at stake. An adaptation of the 1980s NBC series of the same name, Miami Vice is a 2006 action movie about two Miami police officers who work undercover to destroy criminal operations. During one particularly high-stakes case, the two detectives find themselves dragged into the events unfolding, and the lines between their personal and professional identities begin to blur. Miami Vice was the 9th feature film from director Michael Mann, who also wrote and produced it. Like Collateral, Mann's previous film, Miami Vice was not just a sturdy action flick, but a radical experiment in digital filmmaking. Miami Vice went even further in its visual boldness than Collateral, however. Mann threw himself into the dense and grainy aesthetic of digital video that so many people found off-putting at the time. The film has a meager 47% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, with many reviewers highlighting its uninteresting characters and convoluted plot. Over time, however, Miami Vice gained a richly deserved cult following, and many now appreciate this bold and energetic slice of high-octane genre cinema for what it is. It took more than a decade of development for a Hollywood speed racer film adaptation to hit multiplex screens, but it finally happened in 2008, when the Wachowski sisters put forth their vision of the iconic anime.
Oh my god, was that a ninja?
More like a nanja.
The Wachowskis' anime adaptation of Speed Racer follows the titular 18-year-old auto racer as he follows in the footsteps of his late older brother, Rex. Speed Racer soon becomes a sensation in the racing world. When he's offered a contract by the mighty Royalton Industries, he ultimately makes the decision to stick with his family's independent team, Racer Motors. This sets the stage for a classic David versus Goliath showdown that unfolds through various high-octane races. Speed Racer was a massive financial flop in 2008. Adding insult to injury, it was harshly criticized by reviewers for being lacking in strong storytelling and too reliant on CGI, resulting in a 41% tomato meter score. Nowadays, however, Speed Racer is seen by many critics and fans as a visionary film, one in which the Wachowskis attempted to carve out a new, more kinetic film language within the confines of the Hollywood action blockbuster. Even 17 years on, there's still no other movie that looks, moves, or feels like it. One of Chris Hemsworth's first non-franchise vehicles, Blackhat is a 2015 tech thriller directed by Michael Mann. Hemsworth portrays Nicholas Hathaway, a skilled hacker serving time who's offered a commute to his sentence. The only catch? He needs to help the US and Chinese governments locate the hacker responsible for security breaches in both countries. Blackhat was not generally well received by critics. Its score of 33% on Rotten Tomatoes is reflective of the fact that many reviewers deemed it disjointed, silly, and poorly written. But like many Michael Mann films, it did have its share of passionate defenders. And truthfully, if you know where the movie's pleasures lie going in, chances are you might have a great time with it. Blackhat isn't really interested in being a cerebral, airtight thriller. It is, first and foremost, an exercise in visual style, one that sees man turn the mood of the modern world into a spectacle of light and shadow. The story also makes a few astute observations on the balance of societal power in the information age. And for that reason alone, it could be worth a few hours of your time. The 2017 space opera Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets had a budget in the hundreds of millions, put together entirely through non-Hollywood funding, which technically marks it down as the most expensive indie film in history. The plot takes place in the 28th century, in a universe where the International Space Station has been moved to deep space and refitted to become a massive city known as Alpha, which is home to inhabitants of over 3,000 species.
She's home sweet home.
Valerian and Laureline, officers at the United Human Federation Police, are given the mission to retrieve the universe's last specimen of an animal species capable of converting alien pearls into pure energy. Valerian was a box office flop, and it didn't fare too well with reviewers either, scoring 47% on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics in 2017 admonished it for being too corny, messy, and over the top. As it happens though, Valerian is a genuinely fun sci-fi blockbuster adventure, featuring oodles of action, dense world building, and weird visuals. What more could you want? In Time is a brilliantly creative 2011 sci-fi film. Written, directed, and produced by Andrew Niccol, it's got a high-concept hook that puts most high-concept hooks to shame. In a future Earth where humans are genetically engineered to stop aging at 25 and embedded with a timer that kills them upon reaching 0, their remaining time is used as a universal currency. One day, poor factory worker Will is unwittingly given an enormous amount of time by suicidal centenarian Henry Hamilton. After failing to use that time to save his mother from dying, Will sets out on a quest for revenge against the wealthy time hoarders of New Greenwich. Along the way, he's pursued by a kind of police officer known as a timekeeper, who suspects him of killing Henry. Critics attacked In Time for being heavy-handed, and the movie holds a paltry 36% score on Rotten Tomatoes. In truth, the film's revolutionary class metaphor is blunt and unsubtle, but that doesn't make it any less effective. An expert in mining sci-fi high concepts for all they're worth, Niccol commits to a thoroughly fun and atmospheric exploration of the film's brilliant premise, one that's propped up by Roger Deakins' ace cinematography and a cast of superb performers. One of the most notorious cult films of the 90s, Rachel Talalay's Tank Girl is a 1995 screen adaptation of the renowned British comic book series. The story takes place in Australia in the year 2033, 10 years after a comet strike caused a planet-wide drought. All water is now controlled by the Water and Power Corporation, headed by de facto despot Kessely. One day, Kessely's forces attack the commune and take Rebecca Buck, aka Tank Girl, captive. But she soon escapes alongside fellow prisoner Jet Girl. Together, the two climb aboard a stolen tank and embark on an epic crusade against W&P.
Sounds wicked.
A defining entry in the history of punk cinema, Tank Girl endured heavy studio meddling during production, and it was maligned by critics and audiences alike on release. It holds a 45% score on Rotten Tomatoes and flopped massively at the box office. Since then, however, it has been reappraised by many as a misunderstood masterpiece, a film in which Talalay set out to change what Hollywood action cinema was capable of doing. Everything about this movie is utterly unconventional, willfully abrasive, and enormously fun, right down to its uncompromising feminist spin on action cinema archetypes. All in all, Tank Girl is one of the boldest and most original comic book movies of the last 30 years. Recent decades have seen few directorial careers as varied, ambitious, and impressive as Ang Lee's. After helping revitalize Taiwanese cinema throughout the 90s, and then proving himself a visionary Hollywood studio helmer with instant classics such as Sense and Sensibility and Brokeback Mountain, Lee set out to push the very boundaries of filmmaking. First, with 2012's Life of Pi, he ushered in a new era for 3D and for visual effects more broadly. Then, he made it his mission to explore the untapped possibilities of high frame rate filmmaking. 2019's Gemini Man was the second of the two films Lee shot at 120 frames per second. And on this one, he gave himself the extra challenge of making that tech work in the context of a frantic, effects-heavy action thriller. The film stars Will Smith as a retired assassin who begins to be pursued by a younger clone of himself. Sadly, it wasn't all that well received, as reflected in its 27% Rotten Tomatoes score. But while most critics conceded that the film was interesting merely as a bold experiment from a tireless master, Gemini Man actually works much better than it was given credit for. It's a sincere and passionate movie that actively questions the jingoistic machismo of action movies, and it proves, once and for all, that nobody does it quite like Ang Lee. Gamer is a 2009 sci-fi action film with a pretty out-there premise. In the year 2034, ruthless computer programmer and entrepreneur Ken Castle has invented a brain nanite technology that allows humans to control other humans as though they're characters in a video game. Following the success of a virtual community simulator called Society, Castle launches Slayers, a third-person shooter in which players control volunteer death row inmates in real-life death matches. The film follows John Tillman, aka Cable, a popular Slayers avatar who is close to completing the 30-match survival streak that may earn him his freedom, until sabotage and political intrigue set in. If you can get on board with the movie's borderline numbing amounts of over-the-top violence, Gamer is a unique and engaging slice of original sci-fi, despite what its 30% Rotten Tomatoes score might suggest. Directors Mark Neveldine and Brian Taylor are skillful pop stylists, and they managed to make a fireworks show out of the film's various shifts in agency and perspective. Even better, the movie boasts some of the most inventive editing in any Hollywood movie this century. Plagued by production woes and a whitewashing controversy, The Lone Ranger was in trouble from day one. And granted, Gore Verbinski's film is a mess, but in a way, that's what makes it so fascinating. There are so many ideas at play here, from the exploitation of Chinese laborers and the genocide of Native Americans to the takeover of American politics by corrupt corporations. The cinematography is sweeping and beautiful, and some of the sets feel like they were taken from a Baz Luhrmann movie.
If you could just point us in the right direction, we'll take it from here. What's that?
Nothing!
While it's no Pirates of the Caribbean, The Lone Ranger doesn't deserve its bad reputation and proves even the messiest movies have a silver lining. Set in the Amazon jungle, Anaconda is a big, dumb monster flick that traffics in B-movie scares, and we mean that in the best possible way. It follows a group of documentary filmmakers led by Jennifer Lopez who run into the world's biggest and hungriest snake. The creature yanks its victims underwater, snatches them out of the air, and never seems to get its fill of human flesh. And while it's occasionally done with silly CG, there's also a fantastic animatronic snake that looks like it escaped from an evil rainforest cafe. But the serpent isn't even the highlight of the movie. The real draw is Jon Voight as a smarmy poacher with an untraceable accent. He leers and sneers every second he's on camera, all the while plotting ways to catch the killer reptile. Even if that means using human bait. You should just ignore the cynical critics who panned Anaconda because they're just trying to squeeze all the fun out of cinema. 2006's Tokyo Drift is the black sheep of the Fast and Furious franchise. Paul Walker is nowhere to be found, Vin Diesel only shows up for a few seconds, and the undercover cops in International Heist are replaced by a soapy teenage melodrama. The plot follows a troubled American kid named Sean who moves to Japan, gets involved with the Yakuza, and is forced to race the local bully to save his buddies, his girlfriend, and his own honor. Of course, before he can become the king of the road, this hotshot has to learn how to drift. In other words, it's the Karate Kid with cars. Watching these hot rods drift their way down mountain roads is pretty impressive and even kind of beautiful. On top of all that, Tokyo Drift introduces some key players to the F&F franchise: actor Sung Kang, director Justin Lin, and writer Chris Morgan. These guys would be instrumental in shaping the series going forward. But even as its own movie, Tokyo Drift is a slick-looking film with fun race sequences and characters we care about. Guy Ritchie is best known for making comedic crime thrillers, which would seem to make him a weird pick to direct King Arthur: Legend of the Sword. And admittedly, there are parts of this film that are a chore to sit through. But you can't deny its ambition, especially when the monsters roll onto the screen. There are war elephants that tower over castles, and then we watch as a mass of writhing tentacles reveal slimy witches that are part woman, part kraken.
We kept our side of the covenant. It was you who lost the boy and the sword.
Have I not sacrificed enough?
But there's more going on here than just high fantasy. Ritchie brings his trademark humor to the film, and almost every character acts like a Cockney criminal, making King Arthur: Legend of the Sword a wonderfully weird way to spend a Saturday afternoon.
Now tell me a story about a girl called Lucy a Viking called Greybeard, and some rebel graffiti dirtying these walls.
Are you writing a book?
Critics hated Bright. In fact, they loathed it. And you know what? It's totally understandable. Bright has a lot of problems, from its lazy world building and sloppy screenplay to its awkward handling of racial issues. But while it doesn't live up to its potential, it's nevertheless filled with striking images, like a centaur cop and a dragon flying over Los Angeles. And while the story mechanics and character arcs are messy, David Ayer knows how to direct an action scene. The gas station shootout is a highlight, and the moment when Will Smith saves his orc partner from a gang of murderous cops is wonderfully done. But the best thing about Bright has got to be Joel Edgerton, who plays the first orc ever hired to work for the LAPD. He wonderfully conveys pain underneath all his prosthetics, and you should check out Bright for his performance alone.
He fulfilled a great prophecy, Lord. I think we might be in a prophecy.
Universal Studios has been trying to create a monstrous cinematic universe for quite some time. Before The Mummy completely unraveled in 2017, the studio was hoping to get its dark universe going with Dracula Untold in 2014. Unfortunately, lousy box office numbers and a poor tomato meter forced the studio to stake this film in the heart. But while it's not a great movie by any stretch of the imagination, Dracula Untold is wonderfully dumb fun. It's basically a vampire movie meets a superhero flick. Directed by Gary Shore, Dracula Untold finds Luke Evans as the titular bloodsucker. Only instead of trying to murder innocent women, this Dracula is an undead superhero, trying to protect his homeland from invading Turks. This dark tale truly shines when Dracula is beating up bad guys. He plows into a platoon of goons like a mad NFL player, all while roaring like a lion. And using Force-like powers, he commands a legion of bats to batter his enemies. He even creates his own vampire army, resulting in a brilliantly bloody climax. This isn't high art, but if you've ever wondered what would happen if Dracula used his bat powers for good, then this is the movie for you.
That's why you got sick, isn't it? Save me.
Yes. And I would do it all again.
Directed by James Wan, Death Sentence has the gore of Saw, the scares of The Conjuring, and the family feels of Furious 7. In fact, we're legitimately shocked that it has such a low tomato meter. Unlike most of the films on this list, there are no obvious reasons why it was blasted so hard by critics. Instead, this 2007 revenge thriller is gritty, gross, and utterly compelling. With its opening montage of home video footage, we're rooting for Nick Hume from frame one. He's a good dad and a loving husband, so naturally, he's devastated when his oldest son is murdered by a machete-wielding gangster. When Nick realizes the legal system is going to let the killer off easy, he takes justice into his own hands. But what starts off as a simple act of revenge spirals into full-on war when the criminal's brother comes back for blood. Kevin Bacon is the key to the movie's success. He's not some Charles Bronson super vigilante. He's a real human being struggling with guilt and grief. He barely knows how to use a gun, and he breaks down into tears after murdering his son's killer. You really feel the love this guy has for his family and his hatred for the thugs who've threatened his home. In addition to Bacon, there's John Goodman as an F-bomb dropping force of nature who sells Nick his cache of weapons in the best gun buying scene since Taxi Driver.
Dad to dad? Don't tell me about it. Just go do it.
It all caps off with one of cinema's most underrated gunfights, an epic battle awash in red light. Death Sentence is a badass, bloody affair that proves Rotten Tomatoes can sometimes get it wrong. 2016's Gods of Egypt was lambasted for its Eurocentric cast, cheesy acting, and shabby CGI. But its over-the-top performances and bizarre look should actually make it worth your while. Set in ancient Egypt, the plot follows a human thief who's caught in a struggle between two larger-than-life deities. This mythological conflict takes our characters into outer space before plunging them into the underworld. While the movie is absolutely bonkers when it comes to the visuals, it also somehow still plays everything perfectly straight. There's no cynical winking or annoying irony, so if you enjoy big-hearted adventures, then Gods of Egypt will be good for your soul. It's easy to see why Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters has such a low tomato meter. It's mostly because of Hansel and Gretel. They don't have character arcs, their dialogue is flat, and there's nothing distinguishing them from one another besides the fact that one is played by Jeremy Renner and the other by Gemma Arterton. Really, they're just two badasses who run around and blow up witches.
Yeah. Well, whatever you do, don't eat the candy.
But if you're into seeing evil creatures getting their heads cut off, then Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters is the movie for you. This 2013 horror adventure is like Army of Darkness on crack, complete with anachronistic weapons, buckets of blood, and more wicked old hags than you can shake a broomstick at. The monster makeup is on point, and the flying effects are both creepy and cool. And while Renner and Arterton aren't doing a lot with their characters, Famke Janssen more than makes up for it as the villainous head witch. She's big, she's bad, she's over-the-top glorious. And Peter Stormare plays a sheriff bringing the smarm for everyone to hate. Granted, watching Renner punch women in the face is a bit unsettling, but for the most part, the kills here are creative. If you're in the mood for a movie that's lost its mind, this witchy flop is for you.